Hello and welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast, where I'm speaking with a veritable music-making machine, whether he's pumping out hits and getting Grammys with the Black Eyed Peas, or whether he's going hard in his hard rock band Cairo Knife Fight. George Pajon Jr. is a highly respected musician with a ton of credits to his storied career. You may not recognize him, but you will definitely recognize a lot of the music he has put out over the years, including writing and playing on hits with the likes of Sting, Santana, John Legend, Ricky Martin, Macy Gray, Fergie, and obviously the Black Eyed Peas, among others. You'll not want to miss hearing all the stories this man has got up his sleeves. He's the first Grammy winner, Emmy winner, and BMI winner to be on our show. The man co-wrote Barack Obama's "Yes We Can" campaign for song for crying out loud. We'll dig into the mind of this musical madman right after this.
You're listening to the Powered by Rock podcast with your host, Isaac Kuhlman. The Powered by Rock podcast was created to help showcase some of the best rock musicians in the world and to pass on to future generations the rock music that has inspired rock fans around the world for decades. We want listeners to be able to hear great stories and life experiences directly from their favorite artists, as well as dig deeper into music theory and talk rock like no other show you've ever heard. This isn't about looking cool, it's about getting real and having a great time. Without further ado, let's start the show.
All right. Hello and welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast. Today is going to be a pretty big day, as it's not every show that you get a chance to speak to such an accomplished musician as our guest today. George is a highly decorated guitarist, has worked with some of the biggest names in music over the past 30 years or so. If it wasn't for meeting him in a bar randomly here in Las Vegas and having a short conversation with him, I probably wouldn't even realize how awesome he truly is. So thanks, George. Welcome to the show, and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me, and I'll apologize on air for missing it twice.
Yeah, we had to reschedule a couple times. George apparently is a later sleeper than I am, and the early mornings podcasts don't work out as well.
That's an understatement.
Yeah. So I have a feeling, like myself, most people wouldn't recognize you if you were walking down the street, yet you've been pretty successful in the music industry for quite a long time. So do you feel like you kind of get the best of both worlds, and that you can kind of keep your personal identity but still get to be successful as an artist and producer?
Ironically, that was the way it was for probably all the way up to COVID. So right when COVID shut everything down, my wife, one of the things that I said was, oh, man, the little things, like, where am I going to get my hair cut? I always get a shave. She's like, let it grow. Let's see what happens. This happened during COVID. And now I don't get the anonymity anymore, because the minute I get off the stage, they recognize the beard of all things. And so I get swamped. And it used to be, I'd leave a soccer stadium that we just played with the Peas, and we'd be rolling out in the car, the band, no one recognized us, no big deal. Yeah. Now they're jumping out of their cars and stopping the car, and we have to actually do the private exit with them.
That's funny.
And a few times I've had to actually cover it with a towel or sit in the back. And, so I used to get best of both worlds, because I've been very lucky and very successful, and I'd be able to walk in the stadium right after I played and no one recognized me.
Yeah. So how's that kind of changed for you? Does it make any difference as to your day-to-day life now, or do you just kind of, in a normal situation, it's fine, but as long as you're when you're getting off stage is kind of when you're most recognizable?
Day-to-day doesn't change, but it is right off the stage. Like, we just played T-Mobile for iHeart Music Festival.
Yep.
So I had a bunch of friends that were at the barbershop at Cosmo. So I literally walked to the barbershop and took the tram, and it was a nightmare just doing that. And it's like, if you live in Vegas, you know how the barbershop is not close to T-Mobile.
No, it's a good 15-minute walk or so, or whatever. Yeah.
I was still getting recognized at the barbershop at Cosmo. And my bandmate Nick that was the first time he'd see me perform live with the Peas.
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, you deal with this every day? I'm like, every day it's very easy to not deal with, because all you have to do is not, be like a normal person and walk out of the stadium and decide, I'm gonna go to a bar across the street. you don't do that, nothing changes.
Yeah.
If you do that now because they can recognize the beard, then you're going to be taking a lot of pictures. You're going to be asking a lot of questions and getting a lot of shots being offered to you.
Yeah, yeah, and I I bought you a beer at the bar that we were at, but yeah, like I said, I mean, I haven't been a huge pop music fan or anything. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but I didn't even know until I started like looking more into like, your background that there was a band. I assumed like most pop and hip hop artists and stuff like that, they just had backing tracks or maybe had a live band, but might have changed over the years, but you've been there the whole time. So, I mean, you've been creating music in every genre pretty much, whether it be like your funk, jazz, fusion solo album, Fried Plantains from about 18, 20 years ago, or, the heavy industrial rock kind of style of Cairo Knife Fight. But, do you feel like when you have to work with some of these, I mean, you've worked pop, rock, pop, all this other stuff. When you work in these kinds of things, do you feel like you have to compartmentalize your playing, or do you have to kind of, do you just take what and then put that into that song and see if it works, or is it different styles of playing when you go into everything?
I'm kind of I call myself an ignorant musician. I didn't go to school. I don't know how to read or write music.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I don't even know the chords. I create a lot of weird things based on my deficiencies.
Yeah.
And that's what has created situations for me. And a bunch of times I've been so frustrated that I threatened to like stop and go back to school. And a lot of people that have worked with me in the past will tell me, don't you dare. That's what makes you special, is that you don't know what's going on and you take risks that I wouldn't take, because I have a roadmap anytime that an educated musician that is, either has perfect pitch or relative pitch or just knows what they are taking from.
Yeah.
They're not searching the way that I search. And I sometimes search to the point where I create a mistake that is cooler than something that should work.
Yeah.
And I basically, that has been my formula for everything, whether I'm in the studio with Sting or in the studio with Carlos Santana. When Carlos Santana saw me do that, I wrote with him for the album after Supernatural.
Mm-hmm. So we're talking like early 2000s roughly, or late? Yeah.
Yeah. He came, this is when Where's the Love, a song I co-wrote, was nominated for Grammy. And so we played at the Grammys. This is the first year we played at the Grammys, and Carlos was there with his daughters, his whole family, and he asked Will and I to fly us to San Francisco to write on his record. So we did. And so when he watched my process in the studio with Will, he stopped everything. I was like, wait, you have that thing. I'm like, oh, did I do something wrong?
Yeah.
And he's like, you literally are putting the guitar up to your ear and you're searching. He's like, so you don't know what's going on, and you're just an antenna for whatever's out in the atmosphere, and you just allow that stuff to filter through you. So I've only seen that a couple times in my life. And so we had a long, extensive conversation about that. And the funny thing is that he's kind of the same way. He has a lot more musical knowledge, but the way he was writing his solo that he played on that song, he was using a basic scale. So, and his thing is he writes do, re, mi, fa, and he'll write different versions of that on a piece of paper. Yeah. And that's how he maps out where he's going to go with the solos. And he'll be walking around the studio singing those combinations, and then writes it down on a piece of paper. And it's literally a napkin that says re, do, fa, do, re. And I'm like, oh my God, that's amazing. So I connected with him on that level, and he explained to me, another person, I was like, don't you ever change that. You're actually allowing whatever's out there to be funneled through you.
Yeah.
And as frustrating as it may be, you're not relying on book knowledge. You're not relying on, oh, this is a minor chord, so I can, and then there's a million possibilities that you can do there.
Yeah.
You don't have that. You're not hindered by that. Most people get hindered by that because they're like, oh, I know what I'm going to do here. Boom. And then it always sounds the same. It always is formulaic.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about like, hey, you're in the key of C, so you're going to be playing this scale. And so it's like, when you see that kind of stuff, you're like, well, yeah, but then what? Like, there's got to be more than just one thing that you can do. Obviously, there's a million, but they're all like, Mixolydian, Dorian, and all this other stuff. And you're like, that gets a little complicated. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I've seen, there's the truly revolutionary guitar players are the guys that kind of just like a Jimi Hendrix, just don't care about all that stuff and just play whatever's coming to them, and it sounds good.
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. Will called me to go to the record plant in LA, and I misunderstood when he sent me the text. I thought he was asking me to go write with Sheryl Crow. I got really excited, but it's Cheryl Cole.
Okay.
In the UK, there's the Cheryl Cole, Cole.
Yeah.
That's
pretty big over there.
Yeah, huge in Europe. And so I didn't know who she was. When I walked in, I was like, I have no idea who this is, but doesn't matter. You just sit down, and Will texted me and said, I'm in the middle of an argument. I'm gonna be late, so just start writing with her. So it was literally just me and her. And I was in the control room, and so I just set up a session and started working ideas with her. And she liked this one pattern that I was doing on the guitar, and she's like, can you repeat that? And so because I've been playing so long, it's so funny. I get carpal tunnel on the most basic chords, like a bar chord. A basic like G bar chord, I can only hold that for maybe a minute, and then this starts getting completely numb and everything. So many times in the studio when an artist is saying, just repeat that over and over again, I'll start to open tune my guitar because I can't hold the bar chord.
Yeah.
That song, I had to do that because when Will came in and we were working on this idea, then he was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Stay right there. And so as I kept repeating it, I would just lower the pitch on the top string so I wouldn't have to hold the bar chord anymore.
Yeah.
It turned out to be this crazy tuning on that song. The song is called 3 Words. It ended up going #1 in Europe and the UK. And I could never replay that song because I don't remember what the tuning was.
Yeah. It's like 4 steps down, but I only know because it's like 3 minutes into me being in incredible pain.
The guitar player that was touring with her, he called me and got my number, and he's like, man, what tuning is this? I can't figure this thing out. I'm like, man, you tell me when you do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those on the, guitar tabs, ultimateguitartabs.com or whatever. They're like, we don't know how to process this one. You're never going to get it.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the other songs that I was lucky to co-write was Let's Get It Started. And I really played probably the most common rock chord if you're playing like AC/DC or anything. It's just a sus2 chord.
Yeah.
No one ever, when I see cover bands play that, when it was big all over the world and we were touring everywhere, that I remember we played Singapore, and there's this area, the street on Singapore that's a couple miles long, and it's nothing but bars.
Yeah.
So every other bar had a cover band playing that song. And I literally saw 12 cover bands that night playing that song wrong.
You were like, you're supposed to put a pinky over here.
No, they're supposed to leave the top 2 strings open.
There you go. Yeah.
Everyone's playing the straight bar chord. And it's funny to me because it's like one of those things, like for me, it's just this common chord that I play all the time over everything.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I didn't care. I would just put it in there because to me it sounded like a way bigger voice.
Yeah.
And I got it on. Most of the time, Will say, play something more straight. He doesn't like real open voicings. For that song, for some reason, he didn't change it.
Yeah.
and it stayed in there. And so I see that song being played wrong all the time.
Yeah. Well, and for most people's ear, they don't notice out of 6 notes being played, they don't notice 2 that are wrong, right? So it's like they'll hear the main overarching sound, but they won't hear the subtle difference of the couple notes that are played wrong.
That's one of the things that I do all the time, that most, like the musical director in the band, Keith Harris, he he has told me many times, that's technically wrong.
Yeah.
Like, but it sounds right in your head, and it actually sounds really interesting when you put those two together. Not supposed to work together. That chord with the major chord that's supposed to be not supposed to work together. It's like, but it's kind of your voicing.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, if you probably did it with piano and violin, it would sound really weird, but with a guitar, it sounds with like some distortion, it sounds just fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's those things that, like I said, it happened by accident. And it's out of frustration because I've been playing a long time, and I've been a student of many different genres over my, from when I was a kid. One of the hardest questions that people ask me is, that the question that's being asked a lot on podcasts right now and interviews is, what's your first musical experience? Like, what got you going into deciding you're going to be a musician?
Yeah.
That's difficult for me because I did it in stages. Like, I went through I started by, my favorite band was Maiden when I was a kid. Maiden, Sabbath, the typical heavy rock stuff. And then my uncle came and took all my albums and dropped off a bunch of albums that had Hendrix and Cream and Santana in there. And so I became obsessed with the 60s. And that's all I listened to. And then after that, I was dating an older girl that had a stack of classic R&B records like Marvin Gaye's What's Going On, Marvin Gaye's, the album right after that one. And I sat there and was just obsessed with that genre. So like for 2 years, I just like studied that genre. Everyone from Curtis Mayfield to Marvin Gaye to, Stevie Wonder, that's all I listened to. And I didn't realize that by doing that, I was creating this vast musical knowledge of things that were inspiring me in different ways.
Yeah.
It wasn't common for someone to say, oh, I'm going to stop listening to rock for 2 years and just listen to this and only buy these records. And then I'm going to stop that and listen to country for this. And so when it was time to actually start recording and writing, how it happened for me. So I joined the band. I joined the Black Eyed Peas in October 1998. And at this point, the first album was already done and released, and they did one small tour without me, and the original guitar player and keyboard player quit.
Mm-hmm.
I joined my roommate at the time, and we were only going to do one tour, and we actually tried to quit, and Will was like not having it. He's like, no, that's the best the band's ever sounded. You can't quit.
Yeah.
And so we started negotiating with him, and we reached a compromise, and we stayed for a little while. And then when it all changed for me, is Will asked me to come into his studio to work on the singer at the time in the Peas was Kim Hill, and she was signed to Will's label, and they were working on her first solo album.
Yeah.
So his normal guitar player couldn't make it, so he called me. I went in there, and they were sampling Stairway to Heaven.
Okay.
And I kind of laughed, and he's like, what's so funny? I was like, bro, first of all, you're not getting clearance on that.
Yeah.
Second of all, why would you sample that song? Like, you got a gun to your head from like the moment you release that.
Yeah.
You get hate from every rock fan in the world. And how do you make that song better? It's impossible.
It's like in Wayne's World when he starts to play it in the guitar shop. He's like, stop, and it's like no stairway or whatever. It's like you can't play it as good as them, so just stop. Play something else.
So he said to me, man, can you play this or not? I'm like, of course I can play this. All right. And then I played it like the record, and he's like, wait, you know how to play that kind of music? I was like, yeah, man, I know how to play a lot of different types of music. And he's like, okay, come back tomorrow. So I started coming almost every day to his studio, and then he would go to the record store, and when there was record stores back then.
Yeah.
And I remember there was a Virgin down the street from his studio, and we would go there, and he'd spend like $2,000 in buying CDs, and then he'd go to the studio and he'd put the CD in, press play, and skip around to find something that spoke to him, sample it, and I'd be like, "Why are you sampling that?" And he's like, "Why? What do you mean?" I was like, "I can come up with something just like that, and then you don't have to pay someone else, and you get to keep your royalties."
Yeah.
And so he's like, "Okay, let me see."
Yeah.
So I would, because it was like, I mean, I don't know why at that point in time, he was sampling a lot of rock music.
Yeah.
So he was doing.
I think in the 90s, it was kind of just coming off of like, obviously the 80s had a big push on that with like Run DMC and the Aerosmith thing. And then it kind of just stayed in there. I think Dr. Dre and a few other people kind of sampled some rock beats back then. Yeah. And it just was like, because rock music when it's live, it's got that more punchy thing than just like a boop, 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 like a bass beat or whatever. Live, it's different, right? So I think a lot of people were thinking like, let's do rock and combine it with hip hop. But yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it was like the main thing for a lot of people just to do samples. Nobody wanted to come up with their own stuff, and that's why they didn't need a band.
Well, and that's what my voice in the Peas was from that moment. People ask me, when they see Cairo Knife Fight, my band, the most common thing is like, I didn't know you can play like this.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I always played. I never grew up listening to hip hop. Will didn't want me to be a hip hop head. Will wanted my knowledge of different forms of music.
Yeah.
So he would play me something and say, come up with something like that. And that wasn't, to me, it wasn't like, oh, that's a C major to, what I remember is what I learned growing up. Oh, I know what that is. I know how to play like that. I know how to play in that flavor.
Yeah.
That's all I was doing. So I never changed who I was to be in that band. It was luck that I was what he was hearing in his head at that point in time. And which is why I don't do much. I have a song on the new record that is yet to be released that we recorded in London while on tour for 11 weeks. And before that, I haven't been on the last two records because Will's very much into electronic music.
Sure.
Now, he doesn't, guitar in his head right now is a bad word.
Yeah. It's dead.
Other than having me on stage, because even the fact that I'm still there is because it's a comfort thing for him.
Yeah.
I've been there so long that he doesn't have to look my side of the stage. You don't even have to communicate with me. I know where he's going, and I'll just go right to that. When he starts talking, I start creating live on stage.
Yeah.
They've tried many different guitar players because I've when I'm busy doing my thing or there's a conflict in dates, they have to get a sub. It never works out because there's no way to replace the fact that I've seen everything, heard everything, been involved in every mistake, every success. And so I know where he's going. Yeah. I recognize what he wants to do right here. For him, that's irreplaceable. When he wants to start talking, he wants people to immediately react and start coming up with a vibe behind him.
Yeah.
Most people will recognize that, but then that vibe is wrong in his head because it's like, no, that's not what George used to do. This thing. What Keith? What is it that he does? What kind of chords? What kind of? And it's like, bro, only George does that. He's like, trust me. I've shown guitar players live shows, everything. It's his head, man. It's where he goes in his head, and no one else does that. It's not anything special. I'm not reinventing the wheel. It's just 24 years of relationships.
Yeah.
That leads to what comes out of me naturally when we're on stage together.
Yeah.
That's irreplaceable. You cannot teach that. You cannot show someone how to recognize that Will wants me to go, to a song that we did, as a remix on a Sting album in, 2000, and it's like those chords always work. He loves them when I play them. Everyone goes nuts in the band because we haven't heard it in like 5-10 years.
Yeah.
It's funny on the tour we just did. We did 11 weeks in Europe. It's the longest tour we've done, obviously because of COVID. But even before COVID, we weren't doing tours of that length.
Yeah.
So while we were on that, I was like, I'm gonna mess with them every night. So I would learn old songs and just play the chords, and then it would create this craziness on stage, and then we'll be like, oh, keep that going, and at a certain amount of time that we would play, we'd go over every night. Because you
just put a 12-minute ad lib in there. Okay.
Yeah, literally. Like Will, when he hears something that he remembers, he gets excited and starts just freestyling, and he'll freestyle a rap right on the spot about what's going on in the audience. Audience, of course, loves that.
Yeah.
And I was doing that every night to the point where, we started getting scolded. Like, bro, you're going over every night. We're getting charged because some venues will charge you if you go over. There's certain venues that have hard outs. And those, what that means is they have a curfew.
Yeah.
If you go a minute over, they're charging you sometimes $10,000 a minute.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I hope it was worth it. Maybe you got that for a documentary and recoup some of those tens of thousands of dollars.
Will usually is like, I don't care, keep going.
Yeah.
And then that's when the stage manager, production manager, everyone's like, all right, he can afford it. Keep going.
Well, I do want to talk about some of this stuff because obviously the music career you have is varied. So I want to start with first, let's talk about the Black Eyed Peas because, you've won a Grammy or multiple Grammys for example, I don't listen to pop music, but it's hard to avoid certain songs and certain artists and certain genres when they're super, famous. Like the song Don't Funk With My Heart, just reading that title gets that song stuck in my head. That song is now stuck in my head for the next 2-3 hours. I could be doing whatever. And I'm like, bah, 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 bah. And that's just going to be in there. Do you ever, when you're working on a song, do you ever sit down during the process and think oh, I think we got something really cool here? Or is it like once it's after it's done, you're like, hey man, that's a number one kind of track? Or are you kind of just surprised when it happens?
Most of it has been surprise. The only one that I knew was Where's the Love? And only reason being is that song, when it was done, the piece switched from being on Interscope to being handled by Ron Fair at Atlantic, still under the same umbrella. But Ron Fair took over, and Ron Fair put a 30-piece orchestra on Where's the Love?
Yeah.
I was in the studio listening to that being recorded, and I heard the finished product with the orchestra. That's the only time that I was like, this is the number one song.
Yeah.
And I was right about that. Most of the other ones that have gone to number one, like Don't Funk was, I was arguing with Will at that time because I had signed a publishing deal and he wasn't happy with the company I went with because it was bigger than his company. So he had to ask permission of the bigger company in order to, Will was his whole career, he still does it to this day. If there's a movie he wants to be in, he'll go to that director directly and be like, I'll give you this song for basically nothing.
Yeah.
And the song will be on there. But as soon as I signed with a bigger publishing company, then when he would say, hey, let's get it started for this song, they'd be like, okay, great. And you only have to pay this. And then EMI would be like, nope, $125,000. And so that started a war between us. And that song, we were in London and I didn't have writing on it yet. I had worked on it with him. And then he literally put me on blast in front of Jimmy Iovine, in front of Ron Fair, in front of all these music legends. And he's like, okay, Mr. Big Time Writer guy, come up with something here. And he pressed record. And I came up with the, which Ron then turned that into the whole string section.
Yeah.
And it was literally instantly. So, of course, that song, I didn't even think anything of it. I'm like, whatever. With, you know, I was more thinking about how he was disrespecting me in the moment. Didn't think about the music at all. I just played the first thing that came out of my hands, and it ended up on the song. It ended up being the theme of the song.
Yeah.
And so it's just those things that sometimes you think about it. Like Let's Get It Started was very simple. That was written in 20 seconds, basically.
Yeah.
Will listened to Seven Nation Army when it was released by Jack White and the White Stripes, and he told the bass player, we need something like that. And so the bass player was like, boom, 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 boom. And I went, clang, clang. That was it.
Yeah.
So you don't think that's going to be a hit. You're like, oh, that was fun.
Yeah.
That was it. And we literally, that was at rehearsal. And then when we were done rehearsing, Will's like, come to my studio. Let's put that down. So we all went to his studio. We recorded the first version. That's called Let's Get Retarded. That very first version is the one that's on Elephant.
Yeah.
Then how it turned into Let's Get It Started, which is the one that won the Grammy, is the NBA. Will wanted to pitch a song to the NBA to try to get a song on. Every year they pick a song for the finals.
Yeah.
And when the NBA playoffs start, that song is the theme for the whole run of the playoffs.
Yeah.
But Will pitched them Hands Up. That was another song on the record at that time, another song that I co-wrote. And I thought, oh, this is a great idea, Hands Up for the NBA. Yep. Well, the NBA said, no, we had our own idea. We were going to call you guys. Do you think you'd change the lyrics from Let's Get Retarded to Let's Get It Started? And Will's like, yeah, of course. We do that almost nightly. Because, look, Let's Get Retarded got a lot of criticism because you have the word retarded in a song title.
Yeah.
Thus, if you read the lyrics, it's to retard, a musical term, to take things slow and pay attention. Let's get retarded. Let's slow things down and enjoy this party. That's what the intentions of the songs. Sure. You can't explain that when there's a whole row of handicapped people in the front row of a stadium.
Yeah.
You got to change the lyrics of the songs. That's it. So we were already saying, let's get it started. And when the NBA.
Yeah. And that's funny because I remember that song being Let's Get Retarded at first. And I was like, did it change or did I misremember that? Or like, I was just like, I feel like I heard him say that before, but you don't ever hear it anymore. So yeah, it makes sense then.
Yeah, the NBA had us change it, and so we re-recorded the whole song. We didn't like just do the lyrics and we redid the whole song, and then recorded it in London, and that's the one that won the Grammy.
Wow!
And so you asked earlier, so it's been 9 nominations, 7 have won. Yeah,
which is pretty impressive. I mean. I don't know anybody who's won a single Grammy except for you. So that's pretty impressive. And as most people say, Grammys don't matter, but when you win them, you're pretty happy about
it. They do matter. And here's the another thing that most people don't know. Your songs can win Grammys and you get the certificate in the mail, but you don't actually get a statue.
Yeah.
As a musician. For only 2 categories, which really sucks because it makes it almost impossible to actually get a statue.
Yeah.
So my songs that I've written have won 7 Grammys, but I don't have a statue because the only way a musician, a writer, gets a statue is if Song of the Year or Record of the Year wins.
Yeah.
So I've never gotten Song of the Year or Record of the Year, so I don't get a statue.
Yeah. That makes
come over all the time. They're like, where are your statues? I'm like,
go talk to the Recording Music or the Recording Academy of America.
Yeah, you can buy it. Like you can actually buy. Like I don't have the Emmy either, but I can buy it if I want it. And I just feel like that's cheating.
Yeah, like they're so cheap that they can't just give you one.
Yeah, literally, it's the world's changed. Like it used to be even plaques. Like I have like probably 30 plaques. You don't get those no more. You have to actually buy them.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Music is not making the same kind of income that it used to. And
Sure.
so when a record company at the time, any label, when they were making so much money from a number one song, that they would just pay for those plaques and send them to you. And every writer would get it. Everybody in the band would get it. Now you don't get none of that anymore.
Yeah.
You don't get statues. You can buy them. And I'm just like, well, I don't have any place for those 30 that I already own. I'm
yeah. Yeah. It's like, keep them in a museum or do something with them. Like, I won.
Well, there's one that I do have up, and to me, it's probably the most unique one that I have. So Let's Get It Started was used on toothbrushes. I don't know if you remember, they released these toothbrushes for kids that had a button on it, and when you put the toothbrush in your mouth and you press the button, it would play that song. So you're supposed to brush your teeth for the duration of the song.
Oh, wow.
So it was very popular because the kids would like actually brush correctly.
That's hilarious.
I have a plaque for selling 3 million toothbrushes.
Wow.
That's the one.
Pretty impressive.
Because it's like, that's going to be hard to top.
Yeah. That's a lot of toothbrushes. That's
Yeah.
crazy. That's pretty cool. So I was going to say, like, you've definitely accomplished a lot. Obviously, you've been quite successful. Would you give any tips to somebody who's trying to be a lifelong musician, somebody who's trying to just make income as a musician? Do you kind of have to jump around from project to project to kind of find places to make income, or should they stick with one thing until they, get it to where they want it to be? Or what would be your advice there?
My first advice is don't do it. There is no
Run, go work construction, anything else.
Truly, it's a passion project now. There is no income in music anymore.
Yeah.
When's the last time you bought a record?
Yesterday, actually. I bought 5 of them, but I'm very rare. So
Vinyl or
vinyl, yeah.
Okay, that's different.
Yeah.
I'm talking about, it used to be where everyone would have to buy something. So
yeah, that's one of my gripes with the music industry right now, is that everybody gives away their music for free on these streaming services that don't pay them crap back. I'm like, you don't have to do it that way. Like, your customers, if they're truly your fans, will buy your stuff if you don't let them get everything for free.
You just have to be creative. It truly is a passion project now. And to think that you're going to actually pick up an instrument and make an income from that, it's virtually impossible now. Now, it does still happen because to me, it's exciting. It's kind of like the Wild Wild West. So you have these kids that are becoming millionaires on TikTok, and they have never even written a song longer than a couple seconds.
Yeah.
And then Nick, the drummer for Cairo Knife Fight, my partner in Cairo Knife Fight, he just did a session at East West in LA for a TikTok star that paid for a Tesla cash.
Wow.
And he's like, man, this kid has never even written a full song. This is his first 10 full songs.
Wow.
And he's doing a record at East West that he's paying high dollar for. It's like, this is a completely different world that we're living in, a completely different music industry. And the problem is there isn't really no music industry anymore.
Yeah.
Even to get signed nowadays, you have to have done pretty much all the work already.
Yeah. So you have to be famous and popular already. Yeah.
You have to have crazy numbers on all your social media. You have to have selling out everything. And then what's the record company come do? Give you a 360 deal. That means that they own everything, and they're going to
everything vertically too. So anything that you branch off to horizontally, whatever, they're going to take some money from that too.
So it's a different world. And so my advice is, it used to be most commonly when I was growing up, you would see it in movies, and I was told many times, don't have a second master. If you want to do this music industry thing, you do not have a backup plan. You do not have a job that takes you away from it, because that 10 hours that you work at that job, that's 10 hours you could have been building.
Sure.
That's no longer the case. You got to be able to afford to do this. So you have to have a job that pays. If you want to do it at a high level, that means you got to do your own content. You got to record your own stuff. You got to post it. You got to promote it. You got to do everything. You have to be the label. How are you going to do that if you don't have either mom and dad's money, a trust fund, or a job?
Yeah.
And that's what it takes nowadays. Even for me, like my wife and I right now have invested basically our future and our savings and everything into this passion project I have, my band.
Yeah.
She believes in it that much, and I believe in it that much that we've put everything into it. And yes, we've been offered and we've had multiple conversations with labels, but I just don't want to go that route because you're giving up so much.
Yeah.
And so we are in negotiations right now with an investor, because then since it's only two people, you're only giving a percentage of the band away, and then you're still in control of the masters. You're still in control of the vision of the band and which direction things are going to go. And since I've been in this industry for so long, I know exactly, I have so many relationships. What do I need a label for?
Exactly.
Eventually you'll have to go there, because that's the way this industry is. And that's what's going on now. When you have these TikTok stars or social media stars that get really big and are selling out these massive venues, well, they're already bought out, because you can't play Live Nation venues or AEG venues without doing a deal.
Sure.
And so you have to do a deal with AEG or Live Nation, and then now you're a part of the machine.
Yeah.
It's always going to end up there. But, you know, you can control how much you own and don't own nowadays, where before it wasn't an option.
Yeah.
You had to do a record deal because that's just the way the business worked.
Yeah. I mean, you were never going to get mass visibility if you were just trying to do it on your own back then. Like, there was no way for people to find you. It was impossible.
No, it is impossible. I mean, look at Cairo Knife Fight has a video that organically, with us not doing anything, has 127 million views.
Wow.
That would be a possibility 20 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I think YouTube was invented or started in 2004, so it literally would have been impossible. But even if YouTube existed, it would have been very, 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 very hard without a massive record label.
No, you wouldn't get the visibility. You wouldn't get on MTV. You wouldn't get on VH1. Those platforms are still like the radio, terrestrial radio, still reserved for major labels.
Yeah,
that's the old model. So you want to get on there, you have to have a record deal. Yeah. There's no way to get on terrestrial radio. That's why you turn on the radio in your car, every album that you hear, every band that you're listening to, they're signed.
Yeah.
Because that is still saved for record label artists.
Sure.
And it's the last form of music income that is the same as it was, in the 50s.
Yeah.
So if you get on terrestrial radio, then you're making that old school money.
Yeah.
Other than that, you're making pennies on a dollar.
Yeah. And maybe pennies, fractions of pennies.
My suggestion is be able to afford to do it. If you really want to do it, you got to be able to afford to do it. And you got to be so unique that it's indispensable. So if you sound like someone else, you're not going to go far.
Yeah.
If you're like, oh, I get it all the time when we have people that, oh, he sounds like Bruno Mars. What are the labels going to say? Well, we have Bruno Mars. Why would we want another Bruno Mars?
Yeah. We got that guy. He's doing great.
Yeah, he's doing great for us. We don't need a carbon copy.
Yeah, yeah.
And so being unique is the most important thing. You got to do something that no one else is doing. I mean, look at what I'm doing. My band, people come to my shows and they're like, you're an idiot. Because I bring a whole music store with me to those shows just to be able to pull off this two-man band so it doesn't sound like a two-man band.
Yeah.
One of the things that's happening, there's a lot of two-man bands, but they're having issues playing live because the promoters, once the album does really well, then they start performing live. Then the promoters are like, that don't sound like the record. And that's not a very exciting show. So they're getting dropped by booking agencies because it's like, okay, that's not exciting. So I knew that going in. And so I had to make Cairo Knife Fight something that's really exciting to see live. and we get more fans because of our gear than we do the actual music.
Yeah. I was going to mention that you have one of the most insane rigs I've ever seen. Your amp setup, your pedal board setup, everything is like, I don't know, it's like watching Amazon droids or drones or whatever, like work between themselves and like figure out how the music's playing. And I know it's like part of your secret stuff, but I mean, that's just one of the most insane things I've ever seen, where like the amps will automatically play certain parts of the songs and then they'll pair up. And it's like,
yeah,
that's wild. Like, and then your pedal board looks like, I don't know, it's like Blade Runner or something. You open it up and you're just like, okay, well, that's not something you see every day.
Well, and here's a perfect example of your question. The question you asked me, what's your advice? You got to think in that realm. You have to think 10 years ahead of time. The pedal board you're talking about, I'm already 7 versions ahead of what you've seen on social media.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly reinventing myself. And when we finished, we recorded 22 songs at Dave Grohl's 606 Studios on the Sound City board. Once I was done with that, I already have rechanged that pedal board for whatever's coming next, because it can't sound like what's on that record.
Yeah.
That's dead. That's put to bed now. I'm moving on to the next chapter and it all starts with that rig and that pedal board. So you keep enhancing it, you keep exploring, and just don't stop being it. You know, you're only limited by your own creativity. I have an enormous amount of creativity.
Yeah.
That pedal board was a design based on, it was just need. You know, I would do shows with Nick, and I basically copied the original guitar player's formula for the 2-man band and then started expanding on that.
Yeah.
I saw deficiencies in his design, and then I'm very lucky that one of my very close friends is Dave Friedman. So I'd be able to go to Friedman's shop and say, hey, I want to do this, this, and that. He's like, well, that doesn't exist. You can't do that. I was like, okay, well, can we design something to do it? Yes, give me about 2 weeks. And then he'd think about it and he'd call me and he's like, all right, I think I got it figured out. Now come here and show me what you're trying to do. And so there's a lot of that in that pedal board, where there's things in there that you can't buy off the shelves that Dave and I are creating based on, just a need. Like, I'm telling him I want to do this. Okay, well, there's no way to do that. Okay, well, let's figure it out. And
they learned how to charge phones wirelessly. We can figure this out.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's funny because if you watch Dave's podcasts, it's called Tone Talk.
Mm-hmm.
And, they have a feature where you can buy questions and it goes to the front of the line and it gets shown in the air. And so one of the questions that he gets asked a lot is like, what's the most difficult rig build that you've ever done? It's mine. And he's always saying that. And he's like, and you guys don't even know, I already have all the pieces and parts for his next rig. And it's the most insane thing I've ever even seen. He's like, I've had it here for 6 months and I'm afraid to start it because it's going to be so much work and so many possibilities of mistakes that it's just an enormous build. And it's not a size thing. It's okay. So when I'm doing the things that I do, these crazy things that I do with Cairo, technology happens and now I can do more. Yeah. And so I want to add that to that so that I have more options for the future. And for me, it's always about the future. It's always about thinking, I always say this, 10 years in advance. You have to be 10 years in advance. You have to know what your records are going to sound like 4 albums from now, or what you want them to sound like, so you can start building towards that. Yeah. You have to know what your art's going to look like, what your stage show, if you ever get to the point where, oh my God, we have a budget now and I want it to look like this and this, you have to have that.
Yeah.
If you rely on, even when you had creative directors at a label, 20 years ago that were handling all that for you, a person like Will wasn't listening to them.
Yeah.
He was creating all that on his own, drawing, on napkins and showing that to the creative director. I want this. I don't care what you want. I want this. you don't have that attitude, you're going to drown, and you're not going to be able to compete with what they have. That's what you're competing with. You're competing with a whole team at a label that gets paid. One person gets paid to give it a look. Another person gets paid to create that look. That's what you're competing with.
Yeah. And you have to, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that most people in indie bands or rock bands or even like just smaller, time kind of bands in general, is that they think they have to copy what's already out there to sound like what's already out there. It's like, no, you got to do something so different that you get noticed out of all this other stuff that sounds exactly like what's on the radio right now. If you don't, they'll just take what's on the radio. Like it's a business thing too. If you just create a business of any kind and it's exactly like what's already out there, it's going to drown because it's there's already people doing it. Like you go start a fast food chain right now. You going to compete against McDonald's, Burger King, and Wendy's? Hell no. Like you got to do something different, right?
It's 100% true. And one of the things that was most disappointing when I moved to Vegas is that everyone here is doing covers. No one is.
No, not in Vegas.
No, I mean, that's the most common thing. Everyone's making a really good living playing their instrument.
Yeah.
But, the first 6 months that I lived here, you go out and you meet musicians and are like, oh my God, I remember watching you when I was a kid in high school. It's like, you got to come see my band. When you get that in another city, you go see the band. And, okay, well, even if it's bad original music, it's still original music.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times it's like, come see my band. It's like, oh, he's doing a bad cover of, oh my God, that's a terrible, why would you do that? It's a terrible version of that song. And then they're like, why don't you ever come back? And I'm like, because you ain't doing anything that makes me want to come back and see anything. It's like, if you're going to do a cover, at least do your version.
Yeah.
At least, give it a different flavor or something.
Yeah.
And it's the most disappointing thing here. But I also see, this is the way my brain works. I see that and I see opportunity. I'm like, oh, so this is wide open to people that actually create music that doesn't sound like anything else.
Yeah.
And that's what's happened with my band. People see my band once, and what happens is they go and tell 10 friends, or they're like, you got to see this band. It's like nothing else that's going on in this city. Well, I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm just doing things the way that I grew up watching my favorite bands do. And I'm very forward thinking, very creative, and I have a crazy rig, but that crazy rig comes from need. When I would do shows with Nick and I was using the original setup that started in New Zealand, it just didn't work for me because I wanted to take things to a different level. Sure. And so I started to figure out how to do that. And once I get to that level and I'm able to accomplish that, I'm going to want to go here.
Yeah.
Just the way it works for me. Yeah. I'm going to want to go this way and create a broader spectrum of things that keep me interested and keep the listener interested.
Yeah. It reminds me a lot of another famous George Lucas, or maybe like a James Cameron in movies, who always thought 30 years ahead. Like, my movie's got to be like so forward thinking that it's going to impress everybody today for what it is. And then 30 years from now, it's still going to hold up.
One of the things that we've had this music finished, and we haven't released any of it. There's 22 new songs. We haven't released any of it because we're still negotiating with how we're going to release it. And we're very close now. We're probably going to start releasing first quarter of next year.
Nice.
But one of the most common things every single label has said this: we don't even know how to categorize this.
Yeah.
We don't even know what genre this is. And to me, that's frustrating to the manager.
Yeah.
For me, that's the best compliment you can give me.
Yeah.
The same thing happened to Tool. Same thing happened to bands like that, where it's like people are like, what is this?
Yeah.
You don't even know what this is. And you still, to this day, you put on a Tool record for someone that's never heard Tool, and they're going to be like, wow, that's unique. I've never heard anything like that.
Yeah.
Or you put on Mars Volta, same thing. Those are the things that speak to me. I don't want to sound like anything else. Yeah, of course, there's influences everywhere in my music, but it doesn't sound like anything else.
Yeah. When you blend it all together, it's like it takes little pieces, but it doesn't take it and make it the same, right? It's totally different now.
It's completely different, and that's the most common thing that we get when they come see us live and when they hear the music, and that is, oh my God, this is so different. This is so good. And look, I'm biased because I'm in the band. I'm just repeating what is literally, I just played on the 4th, and everyone that came up to me kept saying that. This is a constant thing that is being said. I don't know how two people can make that much noise.
Yeah.
I don't know what, dude, is so unique. It's so different. It's so musicianship wise. They're like, Jesus Christ. But come on, been doing this at the biggest stage possible for 24 years.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing that most people don't understand. They see this massive rig behind me, and you know, for the places we're playing for the time being, you know, people come in.
It fills the entire stage.
Yeah, and people are like, "Oh, please, come on, that's over." I was like, "Bro, but I don't play here."
Yeah. This is my everyday rig for not these places.
Yeah. This is not what I didn't build a rig to live here.
Yeah.
I built a rig that I can use 20 years from now when we're playing stadiums.
Yeah.
It's not about this right now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm having to downgrade my rig constantly to accommodate the fact that when you are playing smaller venues like we are right now, most of the time engineers that are working there do not have the knowledge or the ability to mix a louder band.
Yeah.
You know, that is a lost art nowadays. And it's heartbreaking to me as a rock fan that the most common, one of the things we get a lot is like, oh my God, I felt your music in my clothes. I was like, yeah, that's the way it used to be.
Yeah.
You used to go see Sabbath or Motorhead, you'd go home with your ears ringing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the way it used to be. Nowadays, you know, you got all this modeling going on and no one has stage volume, and it makes the job super easy for the engineer. All they got to do is turn up the vocals, turn up the drums. That's it.
Yeah.
And they don't have to work. I mean, could you imagine when Hendrix was around playing with those stacks and the PAs weren't strong enough?
Yeah.
And so that became a talent for people that were mixing front of house. If you went and saw a good quality sound, that guy would always have a job because he could figure out the right frequencies to make the vocal mic cut through Hendrix's wall of sound.
Yeah.
And same thing for the drums, same thing for the bass or keys or whatever the makeup of the band was. That doesn't exist in these small venues.
Yeah.
Even the rig I have now, I called Friedman and was like, bro, I'm tired of arguing with sound men. So you can't change it. You can't change it. That's the beauty of your band. And I'm like, no, I'm not changing it, but just give me 20 watt amps.
Yeah.
So that changes my volume by 50%. And that's what I'm going to do for right now. 1 by 10, 12, you know, small cabinets, 20 watt amps until we have our own sound man that can actually compensate for the stage volume.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially with your guys' band. It's because there's no bass player. So you're driving all the sound except for drums and vocals. And you know, I was going to say, you know, you're thinking like, you know, Mick Jagger, for example, who, when he would play bars way back in the early 60s and late 50s or whatever it was when they first started, he'd be running around dancing, doing Mick Jagger, what he does on stage at, you know, 60,000 person stadiums now. He was doing that in bars. So if you're not willing to commit to that now, don't ever think that you're going to be able to do it later. Your abilities and your presence and your psychology of where you would want to be with your music isn't going to suddenly switch on when you become famous. You don't just change like that. So think about
it kills
exactly what's that?
It kills bands because they don't have the ability to be able to survive there because they weren't thinking about that already.
Yep.
When you get to the bigger stage, all of a sudden you have to be that much bigger.
Yeah.
To be able to entertain someone.
People are paying $150 now for your shows, not 12 or whatever.
Exactly. You have to think bigger and think, you know, how do I make it bigger splash because we have a bigger stage? I have a great Mick Jagger story.
Go ahead. So
we were on the road opening up for U2, and the Black Eyed Peas were, and they asked us to do "Where's the Love" on the 25th anniversary of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They performed, and so we flew in their plane to New York, and that's where it was taped. And we were at SIR rehearsing, and so for that song, it was Mick Jagger, Fergie did a duet with Mick Jagger, and then the Peas did "Where's the Love," and that was that medley that they did during that. And you can see it online.
Sure,
performance is out there. So when I was in SIR, all of U2's gear from the stage, the big gear, is in SIR, and that was a kick for me just to watch Edge and his, I think it was his B rig, which still is insane. And you know, there's a perfect example. Edge has been thinking this way his whole career, and look at his over the years.
Even his name.
Yeah. Look at over the years, he didn't. As they created more music, those pedals had to go into this rig, so the rig grew and grew and grew and grew, and now it's this massive thing. You know, I don't think he uses that rig anymore, but when he was using it, it was insane to be even near it. It was the most insane rig ever built. And so I'm standing next to that. It's pretty loud. And Will is like, I need more in my ears. I can't hear anything. And Fergie, I need more in my ears. I can't hear anything. When Mick Jagger sang, he projected over everything. I was just like, oh my God, that's amazing. He didn't ask for anything. He just grabbed the mic, and he was louder than the band, louder than every singer, louder than anything in the room. And I'm like, that's why you're Mick Jagger.
Yeah, exactly.
You don't need anything. You're doing it on your own.
Yeah, and it reinforces that, like, that genius of that having that in your ability, in your kind of psyche or conscious the whole time, just like, this is what I'm going to do when I get there, because I'm going to do it now, and I'm just going to build my career off of what I'm doing now, and it's just going to get better and better, but it's always going to be there. Well,
he, you know, when you read or talk to them, because I've had, you know, the blessing of having conversations with guys that are legends like that, for them it was never if, it was just one.
Exactly.
It was
a path. They were going down it regardless of whatever's going on.
Yeah, I speak the same way now. For me, it's not when we're going to play there. It's not if we're ever going to get to that point. It's when.
Yeah.
I don't care about the right now. I don't care about, like, I'll keep building, and I'll keep, you know, creating music, and I'll keep playing, and people will pay attention. We'll get to that point.
Yeah.
You know, it's just navigating how we're going to get to that point, not whether we're going to get to that point.
Yeah. And speaking of which, I know we're kind of running over time, but we'll try to kind of wrap it up a little quickly here, but you don't have to rush, because this is the internet. We'll talk as long as we have to, as long as you're okay to stay around.
Cool. Yeah.
Cool. We had been talking right before this, because I had mentioned, or I took a drink of my football cup, and one of the biggest things that you did is in that same kind of vein, is it was when it was going to happen, right? You guys actually played the Super Bowl halftime show with the Black Eyed Peas. You actually even played the Grey Cup halftime show, which is the Canadian National Football or the Canadian Football League end game, the championship game. So what was that like? Because that's not just a stadium full of people. That's 300 million people worldwide watching that broadcast live as well. Was that different? Were you guys super pressured for that?
It's a billion. It's over a billion.
There you go.
They tell you before you take the stage, like, you're waiting in the same locker room as the you wait in the tunnel that the team runs out of. So when you do the pregame show, so when the Peas did the halftime show, we had already done 2 pregame shows with the Black Eyed Peas, and I think 3 pregame shows with Fergie. So for those, if you, like, next Super Bowl, if you start watching at the beginning of the day at like 8, 9 in the morning, they have bands playing all day long.
Sure.
And that's at the same stadium, and it's the same system that they use for the halftime show, much smaller version of it. So you're basically there all day. And so I did 2 of those before the halftime show, and you would wait in the tunnel. So The pregame shows, to me, way funner because I'm a huge sports fan. Yeah, halftime's amazing, but the pregame show, we were the band that played right before kickoff.
Yeah.
So we did it one year where it was us, Earth, Wind, and Fire played right after Bocephus. He did. Actually, no,
That's a bit of a weird mix, but
yeah, no, the eclectic mix that happens on Super Bowl Sunday is amazing. Like the second time we did it with Earth, Wind, and Fire, they played with us, and then we came on right after Charlie Daniels.
Okay.
So he played Devil Went Down to Georgia. Then we came on and did Let's Get It Started.
Mm-hmm.
And so we waited right in the tunnel where the players come out, perform for basically 3 minutes, and right before you go on, you're like, "You ready? All right, have fun. 1 point something billion people are watching you." And you go out there, you do that, you come back, and you have to wait in the tunnel, and all the teams run out for the game. That's like, I'm like, yeah,
that's awesome.
So the funny thing is that year that we did it, Tom Brady and the Patriots played Philly, the Eagles, when Owens was on the Eagles team.
Yeah.
And the Eagles come out and they're like, "Oh my God, Fergie, Earth, Wind, and Fire. Oh my God." They're not even thinking about the game. And then the Patriots come out and they're like military.
Yeah.
They don't look to the right. They don't look to the left. They look straight ahead, and they're like, "Oh," and I'm like, "They're gonna win."
Yeah.
These guys are too excited to be here. These guys are like military. They're gonna win. So just to get something straight, though, I did not play the halftime show. I was
okay.
I was there, and the NFL did not allow the band to participate because the NFL wanted to hire marching drum and school band look the piece. So there was like 100 marching instruments on the field, and they didn't want the band on there. But I had to record, so all the content, all that's pre-taped. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
And so all the content I had to record, including Slash's solo. So Slash hits me up like, I think the week before. He's like, "Hey man, I got to record all my parts and the solo for that." It's like, "I don't really want to do that. Can you do it for me?" And so the safety track, if his amp wasn't on Super Bowl Sunday, because they have to have that safety track in order, if any of the vocal mics or anything, it's literally
stops working. Yeah.
Such a quick turnover that things can happen. If that doesn't work, then they just turn on that track and the show still goes on. So if his amp didn't work, it was me.
Yeah.
It wasn't Slash. And I was so bitter that day. I'm like, I'm in the audience. I'm in Fergie's box. I'm watching it, and I'm just like, this sucks. If his amp does not work, it's me, and now no one's gonna ever know that it's me.
Did you know if his amp actually ended up working? I'm assuming it did.
Yeah, it did. Yeah.
Okay.
But he did. We had a long conversation after that. We stayed at the same hotel. So after the whole game was over and everybody had gone to the after parties, I sat with him in the lobby, and he was like, "Why'd you have to play such a good solo, man?" It's like, I wouldn't have been able to mimic that shit and we had a laugh. Like, well, I wasn't gonna make it. I try to make it sound a little bit like you.
Yeah.
He's like, but it sounds like, it's like really cool how much it does sound like me, but you added some of your shit in there, and it's like, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
That's funny.
Like, come on, Slash. You're Slash.
Yeah, you'll figure it out. Just give it a couple practices. You can't just go out there drunk and expect to do it on the first try.
Man, hanging with him is so much fun, and he's like really an amazing person, and it's amazing to like walk around with him now.
Yeah,
because he's completely sober, and people will come up to him all the time, and they'll tell him when they saw him or when they met him.
Yeah.
And how he responds is amazing. He says, "Was I nice to you?" And I've been next to him when both sides happen. They'll be like, "No, actually, you were an ass." And he's like, "I apologize. I don't remember that. I was really not a healthy person back then." And then the other side where, no, you were a sweetheart. Okay, great. You know, it's amazing that he has to do that. And he doesn't remember. I mean, if you read his book, and I've had conversations with him about it, he really doesn't remember a lot from that era.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, I mean, you think about it, when you're literally traveling the world, waking up in different cities every single day for 8 years straight or whatever, it's pretty tough to keep all that stuff together. And you're around people in different cities that aren't even people that you've met before, that are supposed to be managing your career, your band, or whatever. And it's like, I don't even know who you are. Like, how am I supposed to know all these people? But the record labels set that all up. So it'd be very strange.
I do it still to this day. I mean, I travel nonstop, and it's Groundhogs. Everything looks the same. You're in, you know, the only difference is the slight differences between the hotels.
Yeah,
the look the same. The airports look the same. The stages look the same. They set it up the same way every night. You don't change production values until a new album. So you're looking at Groundhog's Day every day. You literally look up the same ramp. The backstage area looks the same. Your dressing room looks the same. And the only thing that changes is the room at the hotel, if you're in a different chain. Marriott's every night, it looks exactly the same. So it's Groundhog's Day every day. I completely know why he doesn't understand. Then you add alcohol and drugs to that mix.
Oh yeah.
Forget about it. There's no way you'll remember. No way. Like, I don't remember. It's amazing to me that I remember. My wife says this all the time. I don't know how you do that. I don't forget room numbers. Don't know why. I don't need.
I forget them literally every time I'm traveling. I'm like, I don't remember the room number. I remember kind of just the general area and start walking towards it. I'm like, it's got to be one of these 4 doors, though. I have no idea which one it is.
That's the one thing I don't forget. I only take the room key with me, because I don't need to. I see it once and I'm like, oh, I'm in 475. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
And that's me and Jorge. Jorge's my alter ego when I'm drunk. Jorge remembers as well. I don't know why.
That's funny. So I do want to mention a couple last things, but one kind of more deeper subject is, you know, it's not all being successful and being, a very, I guess, well-traveled musician isn't all it's cracked up to be. And there's been things that have been setbacks, and there's bumps in the road. And I won't get into the exact part of it, but essentially you had a lawsuit against the management of the Black Eyed Peas, I believe, for tax management and an illegal dispute there. This seems to happen way too often, where people's management just doesn't pay taxes, or they basically funnel their income away from what they're supposed to pay or whatever. So do you have any advice for bands, like even just like on a minor level, what they should be looking at when they're actually starting a band? Because they're essentially starting a business and they just don't know it.
Yeah, it's very, very true and very important. And what the thing that happens that creates this, and it's a constant thing that happens all the time, is the band goes from, so it wasn't manager, it was the actual accountant. Okay. So the accountant, the only person that had an accountant before the Black Eyed Peas were big was Will. Yeah. He's the only person that had enough money to actually merit having an accountant, and was so busy that you need someone to actually pay the normal bills, because you just don't have the time. Yeah. And so if you are lucky enough to get a hit, and then it propels you into being on the road for 3 years without coming home, which is what happened to us, you go from, and remember, this was during a time when there was no internet, it was dial-up. Yeah. And so there was no way to pay your bills online. Yeah. And so everyone had to get an accountant. I just went with Will's guy because I had a relationship with him already when Will was paying me to be in the studio. I was the only guy getting paid to show up to the studio every day to work with Will. And so I was getting my money from him. And then as soon as I got my first #1 song, I had writing on that first check, I didn't want to make a mistake and actually just waste that money myself. Yeah. And so I hired him, and I thought I was doing the right thing. Hell, my parents told me I was doing the right thing. They loved him. We would see him at shows all the time and everything. And he spoke at my wedding. This is how
Wow.
nasty that whole situation was. And that cost me 10 years of my life. I was in
Wow.
that battle for 10 years. And that's why I left California. I was so bitter about what California put me through that, and I could have bought 3 houses for what they made me pay, because I proved that it wasn't my fault, but they didn't care. It was like, no,
Yeah.
it's your debt. You shouldn't have hired him. I'm like, but wait, I didn't do this. Didn't care. Nope, your debt, your number, your responsibility. I do understand that, but come on. I mean,
why are you hiring a professional to do it if it's your debt regardless? Like, it's like they got to have some sort of professional responsibility.
So my advice is be in control of everything. Do not, I don't care how much you trust that person. Do not sign your own checks. Be in control of everything. And because I know 3 other people that are doing the same thing right now. That are going through the same problem. And it's just because if your band all of a sudden does what happened with the Peas, where we were on our last tour, Jimmy Iovine told Will, if you don't have a number 1 by the end of this tour, we're dropping the band.
Wow.
So that song went to number 1 in July of a 3-month tour that started in June. It was the middle of the run, and we're like, oh man, save every penny because this is over.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, we never came back. 3 months turned into 5 years.
Yeah.
That turns into this situation where, oh, where am I going to live? Where's my car going to park?
Yeah. Store everything because you don't know where it's going to be.
Literally, when we came to do the Staples Center show, when that tour was opening, we were opening at Staples Center. We had 3 days in LA and everyone did the same thing. Everyone got like 3 storage units and everything went in there. And I was lucky enough to sublet my studio house. And so that was taken care of. But literally it went from me paying my own bills to me just handing over the keys to this guy.
Yeah.
For the next 5 years was paying everything. And I would get phone calls and all of a sudden my account would go from $20 to $0. I'm like, whoa, what happened? Oh, taxes, man. And okay, so I'm good. Taxes are paid. Yes. Okay. And you go on and you just continue to work because I was working at the time. I literally was on the road 300 days out of the year.
Yeah.
So if not more. And so when you get home and what happens with taxes, it's a common practice for every CPA to send more money to the government, and then they do the taxes later, and then you get a big refund. And so what happened in my case is he did that for 5 years, and you only have 5 years to recoup that money. So, for example, if you send, $10,000 over what you really owed, you have 5 years from that point. And this was back when it happened to me. I don't know if those rules have changed.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's like 3 years now.
Yeah.
But you only have a certain amount of time to reclaim that money, file your taxes, and then they'll give you the refund and apply the money you sent.
Yeah.
Money wasn't applied, nor did I get the refund. It was just gone.
Yeah.
And so that started that whole incredibly difficult case to finish because, it was on my honeymoon that I got my attorney called me and told me, I have really bad news for you. You owe the federal government $665,000.
Wow.
And so then it started me trying to show them that not only has the music industry changed, I'm never going to make that kind of money again. No one buys CDs.
Yeah.
When Where's the Love went to number 1, we were selling 1.3 million physical units a week.
Yeah.
Physical units. We outsold Eminem. That's how we got to number 1.
Yeah.
Imagine the numbers that brings in as compared to now, where you don't sell a single physical unit. You know how hard it was to convince the government that doesn't exist no more.
Yeah. You're like, no, you're still in a famous band. You still make that's not the same business model now.
No, it's not. And most people don't realize that streaming numbers do not go to writers; they go to the artist.
Yep.
The major money is made by the artist. And it's not major money, but the bulk of that money.
The bulk of the little money, yeah.
Yeah, the bulk of the little money goes to the actual artists, not
Yeah.
the writers or the producers. That's why you see the story that's all over the internet all the time. The person that wrote Wrecking Ball for Miley Cyrus made like $10,000 on that song because she's the writer. The rest of it went to Miley.
Yeah.
Streaming numbers go to the artist.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, there's so much more we could talk about. Obviously, I don't want to keep you here all night. We got to eat dinner. It's getting late, but I know we'll add some links. I know you guys have some shows coming up. I think you even have a show. This will come out after these shows air, but I think you have one coming up Saturday, which I'm going to be coming to at downtown, the usual place downtown in Las Vegas here. Do you have any other shows coming up for the rest of the year in any of the projects?
Yeah, we have two shows for Cairo. So it's the usual place on the 15th, and then Pappy and Harriet's on the 23rd.
Okay.
That's in Pioneer Town. The Peas, we do, let's see, we play the LA Coliseum on the 21st. We do the Disney Christmas special November 3rd and 4th. And then we do 3 iHeartRadio Jingle Ball events in Dallas, Fort Worth, Sunrise, Florida, and Tampa, Florida. That wraps up the year. And I think we're going to Qatar for FIFA, the World Cup.
Wow, that'd be pretty cool.
Well, we've done. I should have said it when you mentioned the Super Bowls and the Grey Cup. Those were all amazing, but we've also done 3 World Cups. This year alone, I've done 3 Formula One races.
Wow, yeah, that's massive audience too.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so cool to do those.
There's a lot of money in that Formula One there.
Man, it's insane. You think the Super Bowl is rich?
Yeah. It's like everybody's showing up to yachts and just partying like $1 billion just down the drain, whatever.
Oh, it's crazy because we're going to see it here in Vegas next year, November of 2023, and you'll see the amount of like Formula One has a different audience. Formula One is like sheiks and Prince, and it's like crazy oil money, and it's like, oh my God, this is insane. Like the amount of Ferraris and Lamborghinis and everything that you see in
private jets and all that stuff. Yeah.
But people for Formula One races, they fly their cars.
Wow.
Because they have custom one of a kind builds that they fly to every Formula One race they go to. And I asked one of the guys, like, dude, how much you spend on that? He's like, it's actually not that expensive. I'm like, well, what's not expensive? He's like, for every flight that we fly our cars, like $20,000.
It's pretty expensive. I mean, it's half of a regular car.
Yeah, for us, yes. For a sheik that's worth, $200 billion.
Yeah,
that's $25.
Yeah, like, 20,000. What's that? It's like nickels. Yeah. But yeah.
And you know what's funny is most people in Vegas don't know what they're about to get.
Yeah.
I talk to a lot of people when we do those Formula One events that I'll see after parties or at the shows, and they don't realize that these people come in and if your house is anywhere near the race course, they'll give you like a whole year's worth of rent or mortgage just to take over your place so they could be right next to the track.
That's crazy.
And this happens every race anywhere in the world. If your house is next to the track, they'll literally knock on your door, a representative, and be like, how much is your rent? We'll pay for 2 years. Get out.
That's crazy. Just so they can hang out for a week.
Yeah, just so they can hang out for a week, and that's their home base next to the track. And what they're looking for is to be able to like wake up and see the like warm-ups, because they even right before the race starts, 30 seconds before the race, they're still warming up the tires and taking one lap. And really interesting to be there right before they race.
Yeah. Well, very cool. I will put a bunch of the links to your guys' music, both of the Black Eyed Peas and Cairo Knife Fight, into the show notes below this episode. I do want to ask one question: is just one album, one musician, one artist. What new music would you recommend before we go today?
Ooh, damn, that's a hard question. New music. I can't recommend this album. The album that's speaking to me right now, it's weird because is speaking to me for different reasons, production and guitar playing, is the new Billie Eilish record, but everyone loves that record, so that's kind of cheating.
Yeah.
My favorite guitar player right now, and I'll just say guitar player, is Joey Landreth. No, not a lot of people know who Joey Landreth is. In his band, you can search him through his personal name, Joey Landreth, and then he has another band with Landreth, the Landreth brothers.
Okay.
Brothers Landreth. He's like, I would say, obviously the best slide guitar player in the world is Derek Trucks. Right below that is Joey Landreth.
Okay.
He's
interesting.
So amazing. And then he sings like a bird and he writes amazing music. It's just unbelievable. But, you know, it's hard for me to answer that question because I go on deep dives, man.
Sure.
I'm on a plane all the time and I'll sit on, I only listen to music on Tidal because it's higher fidelity, and I'm a snob when it comes to, I cannot listen to Spotify because the sound sucks.
Super compressed. Yeah.
Yeah. And same thing for iTunes. Tidal to me is the only thing I can listen to it in, and you have to have the space on your phone because you're downloading the master quality.
Yeah.
And so it takes a long time to do that. You have to, so I'll sit here before a flight and I'll download 15 records that I'm deep diving it on.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'll tell you what the last one is.
Okay. And that's one of the things about Tidal is that they actually pay the artist like something like 15 times more what Spotify pays or something like that, which is pretty cool.
This is a band that opened up for the Peas at the Formula One event. Had no idea who they were, but they were great. I don't know how, but they found me is the name of the band. That's the name.
I don't know how, but they found me. Well, there you go.
and that's the last thing I downloaded on Tidal and I've been listening to.
Nice.
Other than that, like I love the new Clutch record.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah.
I'm a huge Clutch fan.
Yeah.
That's the career that I'm striving for with Cairo is, you know, Clutch is one of those bands that they just did things their own way, and it's still possible to do that. You just have to have something that people are going to want to come see.
Yeah, exactly.
Build it the old-fashioned way, you know. As soon as you sell out 150, you move to the 300 seat place. As soon as you sell that out, you move to the next, and that's what they did over the last 20 years that they've been around.
Yeah, now like 1,500, 2,000 person shows constantly, maybe even more sometimes. Yeah, depending on the city.
But they still do it their own way. It's their label, their everything.
Yeah,
you know, those bands inspire me a lot. Like I want a Clutch career for Cairo.
Yeah, and they don't just keep it to like the one genre. Like they don't just play like hard rock or whatever. They like mix in the country twang and all that stuff.
Yeah, like their new record they just released is way heavier than anything they've done recently. Yeah, it's funny when you read the interview for that record. They're like, "We wanted to make a dance record. It just turned out this way."
Yeah, we forgot that we're still Clutch.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much, George, for being on the show today. Guys, make sure to go to the show notes below this episode to check out his music. Obviously, you know the Black Eyed Peas, but make sure to go check out Cairo Knife Fight as well, because, you know, I'm going to go see him live this week, and I'll report back because I'm sure my mind's going to be blown because I've seen some of the stuff online, but I know it's different in person. So make sure you go check that stuff out. And remember, guys, the Powered by Rock podcast is powered by our listeners. If you want to show some support, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and share it on social media as well. You can also make a donation to the podcast if you'd like to help us keep making some awesome episodes with great guests like George here. You can find that link in the show notes as well. You can find the full video interview on our YouTube channel and Spotify now as well. If you want to check out some of our articles, album reviews, lists, and interviews, go to poweredbyrock.com to read our absolutely free rocking blog. You can also find some merch and gear so you can pick up some items to play and look like a rock legend. That's our show for today. We'll see you soon again for the next episode. Until then, rock on.
Supposed to be